In this episode of Cretaceous Park, I'll be building an exhibit for two different dinosaurs. Setting out from the Cretaceous century, we'll move across this open space and into the area where the two animals will live. This is Alambiasaurus and Styracosaurus exhibit, and I'm going to start by laying down some water, a river that will pass through the whole exhibit. And the elevated area that will be eventually set up to have a waterfall into the first part of the water that I did there. We don't have waterfall pieces yet, but they have been promised to be coming. So I'm setting up two elevated areas in the exhibit, which in general is lower than the level of the path that runs along that rocky ledge that I had set up ahead of time. So that will bring the animals up to essentially eye level for the guests, even though they'll be a bit further away than those that are down on the lower level of the exhibit. That lower level is really not much taller than the Lambeosaurs, so they're not going to be that far away. So again, water on the upper part and out of the exhibit on that side, raising some ground that'll eventually hide that part of the fence and transition from the exhibit out of the exhibit. You saw the Lambeosaur have a little trouble with the slope there, and I did a little bit of smoothing there. It's a good idea to smooth a lot of those slopes and definitely have rampish sort of areas where the animals can move down without falling on their heads. So the next step I'm doing is a lot of terrain painting to try and break up that golf course grass effect that is the basic set for the island, or the land in any case. And just getting a general idea of what the landforms will be. Roughing out some rock area for the future waterfall location. And it's a good idea to do this before you put in a lot of trees, so you have an easier time seeing what you're doing. Because once the canopy trees go in, your view is of necessity limited. You just can't see as far because you have to move the camera in underneath the canopy in order to see the ground. So this is going to be a long build. It's a big habitat, enough for the two animals and maybe a bit because I have future plans for this area because of some of the animals that are coming. The devs have already announced some of them, one of which is likely to be available when beta launches. So there will be updates to this exhibit, assuming the alpha survives into beta. If it doesn't, then I will revisit this exhibit again in a beta version of a park. These two animals are contemporaries, so in the future there will be a bonus for exhibiting them together. And they represent part of a real fauna. There are other animals from this fossil formation that can be exhibited with them as well in the planned list. And so when they come along, they can be added to this exhibit to make a true multi-species exhibit. I'm hoping, oops, somebody fell on his head. Definitely have to fix that slope. Anyway, I'm really hoping that I'll be able to do a safari through this area. A lot of these animals are from the Dinosaur Park Formation, and having visited that area of the world, uh, I think it's pretty cool. And it'll make a nice, slightly less high star exhibit than a similar Hell Creek safari. Both of these are North American faunas that the game is planning to have a significant number of animals from. Uh, and that makes them ripe for safari type adventures. And since the devs showed a safari game in the past, not game, sorry, they showed a safari building for the vehicles. Uh, it's likely that that will be the first ride, if you will, that makes it into the game. Um, and I'm looking forward to that. I was very fond of the Jeep from the demo uh, back in the Kickstarter days, and that just made a lot of fun for being in the game because it gave you a very clear viewpoint for moving through your park or your setup, and just fun to have driving through your park and into some of the exhibits to get a more person's eye view of what the dinosaurs would look like, even if it did occasionally involve reversing quickly away from a Triceratops that didn't like you encroaching on its territory. So I really hope they'll bring that kind of bit back. Um, so putting rocks on top of the rocks, as it were, to give more definition to where that waterfall will be, and we'll see how it has to be worked to make it look good when waterfalls become a real option as opposed to a notional option. And obviously, that may mean some of this needs to be reworked, and that's fine. It's to be expected at this stage of the game's development that a lot of things will need to be revisited. Um, and oh yeah, we got one of the shadow problems going on where tree shadows hit water. You can see it right here, that sharp edge uh, where the shadow disappears. Uh, and that's something that's currently going on with the game's rendering engine. Uh, it's One hopes going to be fixed. It's got to do with the water for sure, because when you place plants down along that line, which I ought to do, and I think I did, uh, they will pick up the shadows and soften that hard line, and yeah, like that, and disguise it, and just you stop seeing it, and the game, the exhibit looks a lot better once you do that. Food for the dinos. They don't eat yet in alpha, but we do have their feeders, and I put them in here mostly with an idea toward thinking about where the feeders would be to make them um, an attraction for the guests, where we can guarantee the animals will come sometimes. Uh, Doing some sunken plants there along the rock line to hide the rough edge and blend it in a little bit better. So right now I'm working with modular plants for the things that I'm sinking particularly, and using a variety of the logs to build a log jam sort of arrangement, which stacked logs is something zoos use sometimes to be at the edge of an elevated area in an exhibit, the animals recognize it as something they don't want to walk over, so it keeps them from possibly injuring themselves on a slope that's too steep for them to safely navigate. Um, what this would have been if this were a real environment, I am gonna have put some rocks down where they could have caught a log or three, and then those logs would have caught other ones, so that this river at one point may have come through here. You'll note it's very flat on the viewer side of this log jam, and higher beyond it. So silt building up there would create a different elevation. Um, and putting in dirt on there, and then bring in some more plants to conceal the raw edges of the various things. Uh, and work some more on some of the ground painting that I was doing in this area. Uh, One of the challenges in doing a large exhibit area like this is keeping um, the work you're doing fresh, make it look a little different, um, so it isn't all same old, same old. Um, the uh, foliage painting brush makes it quite easy to put in plants, and I'm using it right now here to put in stuff. Um, but it all gets a certain amount of sameness unless you bring in some deliberately placed and designed elements. So right now I'm working on some of the ridges where the ground has a different elevation, and different elevations is indeed one of those ways to give some variety to the habitat, some interest, give some exercise to the animals, or would if they were real. Um, and But it's a lot of time to go over all that territory to make it all look good, um, with the idea that you're never quite sure where uh, your guests or your visitors who come to see what you've done in the game will be looking, particularly if we ever get a share the park kind of feature on Steam. So the trees and plants in here are a combination of temperate and tropical. The park itself is in a tropical area, and naturally tropical plants would be at home there, and temperate ones not so much. But this particular habitat comes from the late Cretaceous, and the world in the late Cretaceous was starting to look somewhat familiar to those of us from the Cenozoic. But it was still warmer in general than it is now in most parts of the world. And so, more tropical plants would survive better with more temperate plants. Uh, but it does give a slightly alien feel to this environment, uh, since for us, the habitat for these plants uh, is rather distinct and different, more so than it may have been back then. Um, It'd be nicer when we have some more plants. I may come back and mess with some of the plants to swap them out for other, uh, shall we say, more less advanced plants that are more appropriate to the time frame of the animals from some other environments. Uh, but I don't have access to those just now. Uh, so yeah, a log there, presumably to discourage the animals from falling down that slope, and blend it in some more with some very specifically chosen plants, ones that I can sink or even occasionally change the size of to add another bit of variety like that. Um, so you can still see some of the shadow issues, that one tree shadow where I'm putting the reeds down. It disappears on the water even though it's on both sides. So this portion is where the river leaves this current exhibit, and so I've got to set something up here to cover how the park would handle a water feature leaving an exhibit. I don't want it to be as obvious as iron bars and stuff. And even if there were iron bars, zoo would very likely want to minimize the visibility of such things. So a little rocky underpass for the river there, and a lot of screening plants. And as you can see from your point of view right now, you can't really see the fence where the water disappears. So you're left to imagine it moving through this somewhat constricted area to wherever the river's going. Um, as you saw earlier in the episode, it's really not going much of anywhere beyond the fence for the moment. But that's okay. That's okay. It's a big area that this park can be, and one can't fill it instantly. You can do a pretty good job of filling it with something with the foliage brush, but it won't be artistic. Uh, there's an aesthetic to a lovely landscape, um, and there have been landscape painters for centuries. They don't always just paint the landscape as it is; they paint it in its idealized form. There's another one of those shadows, um, and to make it pleasing to the human eye. And that's what we do a lot with these games. We want to look at a picture we think looks neat, uh, and makes our animals stand out. Uh, that we want to take an in-game snapshot of, perhaps, like that. um, and yeah, playing with the camera here to get a nice frame shot of the lambeosaur head while he's grazing. Um, I had contemplated cutting that section out, but it is providing a nice opportunity to mention the camera tool, which is still a work in progress, but allows you to change the time of day. Since the park stays at one time in the game proper, you can change the lighting. Still can't do night in it, so night has not come to Prehistoric Kingdom yet. It will. It will. You'll notice how placing that rock there discouraged the dinosaur from going down that slope, and now I'm placing a flat rock to give that Styracosaur a little something to sleep on other than air. These two guys both decided to come out here and hang around on this rock, and I took the opportunity to get a picture with the two of them as well. And I'm pretty sure that's the one that's the thumbnail for the beginning of this episode. I'm doing this on pause with the hope of getting that good shot. That one I decided wasn't a good shot, with the lambeosaur treating the Styracosaur's nose horn as a popsicle. And a transition here through that strange green business to the animal care structure in the back of the exhibit. Concrete primary structure, concrete floors for easy cleaning for the keepers, and there'll be a keeper area as well. I'm laying out a general building here without too much in the way of detail, just to get my space down. And I've already taken out the fence that ran through where the building is sitting. The idea here is to have separate areas for the two animals, the larger doors for the Lambeosaurus and the smaller one for the Styracosaurus. Uh, You'll later see me checking whether this will work for the animal. Here we go. Yeah, this is using the where they can walk, and trying to find both of my animals. The Styracosaurus, of course, can go in the bigger door, no problem. That would be quite natural. So now I'm making the top of the Styracosaur door a little bit lower in hopes of discouraging the Lambeosaurus from going in there. But it was too big, so it kept everybody out. And that's non-desirable. There's really no way to keep the Styracosaurus out of a door the Lambeosaurus can go through. But I don't know. Maybe there will eventually be some thing that can be used that the Styracosaurus will pay attention to and the Lambeosaurus won't. Anyway, one of the things I want to do in my exhibits is not have the buildings be terribly visible, the low profile thing I was talking about in a previous episode, but also blending them in. So right now I'm working on setting up a trellis to grow some vines on to help conceal the shorter part of the building. After I did this video, reflecting on what I had done and reviewing what I'd done with the Nasutoceratops building, I'm probably going to go back in and change this side of the building to the stone walls, the exhibit facing side being stone faced the way the Nasuto one is. And I will probably make that a consistent element through at least the first set of buildings for Cretaceous Park. So I guess in the next buildings, they won't all start concrete. So I'm pleased to see that the ivy is much better behaving than it was when I was building the patio for the information and education building out at the entry plaza. I guess that means I need to go back there and finish the ivy on that at some point. I didn't want to make this fully covered right now, in part to show off the structure that I'm using, but also as sort of a well, let's do a better job of concealing this building, but the plants haven't had time to grow in. And again, the aesthetics, the light wood, the dark green, the foundation plantings add some variety to what we're looking at, and that makes it more pleasant to look at. I had to do some trimming of some of the brush painted plants and ones that were originally down in this space from the island map, because the large animals like Lambeosaurus moving in and out of the building, they're not going to leave much in the way of plants on their preferred routes. So that's kind of important to verisimilitude. So setting up some concrete pillars, this is intended to represent the kind of arrangement that zoos use for elephants sometimes, where the animals can come right up to the bars and the keepers and the vets can reach through to do what they need to do. In case of elephants, their trunks come through for their treats while they're being brought over for examination or care. So trying to set up one of those here in the Lambeo building and set the concrete pillars, which would be reinforced, of course, into the wall proper to make it even more secure. And I lost my footer there. So do it all over again. We don't have the redo button yet. So, and make a little platform there. Give the keepers a step up to reach the lambeosaurs if they need it. Also a place to put things down so they don't have to reach down as far. Um, just a little bit of quality of life for the keepers. And now some columns to break up the solid wall. We've got 4 on this side. And now a similar uh, arrangement for the care area here, but for the styracosaurs, so it doesn't have to be as big since they're smaller animals. And I decided to put in keeper door walls. I don't know yet whether keepers will actually be able to, walk through the game supplied doors, or how that's going to play out. Whether it'll be something like Planet Zoo, where you have to conceal a fence with a gate in your opening. But at least, Planet Zoo does actually use the openings that will let the keepers go through the gates. So for the moment, I will anticipate it being more or less the same, and just go with that. So I'm working on what I considering an observation window into the lambeosaur sleeping area, and evening out some of the wall supports and such. Taking a look at the whole thing, deciding if I like it. Duplicating the columns to make it easier to set up the columns for the other side, to have those entries framed. I should come back and put some kind of door that can be closed off there. This is a tropical area, so there would be tropical storms, and you would want to be able to shelter your animals. So, having put a roof on the Lambeo area, it's finished for now, and it's time to work on the Styracosaur portion of this building. I decided to make the height a little taller so that I could have the whole thing tall enough for the Styracosaurs, but yet low enough to be a different level for the visual interest. And for both of these, I'm setting the columns a little higher than the wall, and setting the main roof just below the wall line. I imagine that there is a drainage system built into the top of the wall there. The game doesn't have obvious drain pipes or gutters at this moment, so one has to either just imagine they're there or fake it. So as you can see, that change in the height brings the height of this wall up to the Lambeo wall, which is what I wanted, but there's still that last square in the ventilation area to do. So I used the 4x4 pyramidal roof and then dropped its height using the scaling tool to match the slope of the other pieces, which are the 1/4 proportion. And I had to do something similar with the edge trim for the 4x4 pyramidal roof, so it matched as well. So there, yeah, okay. Checking now to see how much of the building is visible and what parts from the guest viewpoint. That's part of deciding what to do. And here I'm putting in concealing plants, and I still still think even with those I'll be wanting to go back and change it to stone, uh, just for the variety and a little bit breakup of all that concrete. So that was some more taking out the plants where the hadrosaurs are going to walk. And oops, I had a goof. I inadvertently hit the water somehow. So now I had to go back and eliminate all that water. And back to taking out the plants to represent the runs the animals would use in moving to and from the building. So more dirt type textures there than ground cover. And another look to see what we're seeing. And it's looking pretty good. But yeah, definitely want to do that stone. Or plop a big tree in the way like I just did. Uh, and that helps a lot whilst giving some more shade to the animals. Did another one there on that sight line. It turned out to be a smaller tree, uh, but something I can live with. So obviously more to do there. And in the next part of this exhibit, we'll work on some of the guest stuff. See you later.